Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashyakritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ नमः प्रणवार्थाय शुद्धज्ञानैकमूर्तये निर्मलाय प्रशान्ताय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
நமஸ்காரம் குருஜி.
ஓம் ஓம் சோத்தியம். எப்படி இருக்கீள்?
இருக்கேன் குருஜி. நான் இன்னைக்கு வரேன் ஜி. நான் உங்களோட ஆசீர்வாதம் வேணும் ஜி எனக்கு.
வாங்கோ வாங்கோ வாங்கோ.
நான் வர எத்தனை மணிக்கு அவைலபிளா இருப்பேன் குருஜி?
இங்கதான் இருக்கேம்மா. இல்லை எனக்கு கொஞ்சம் காத்தால வந்து இருப்பேன். அதுக்கப்புறம் ஐ ஹேவ் சம் ஒர்க் இன் தி ஹாஸ்பிட்டல்.
எத்தனை மணிக்கு வரலாம் குருஜி? சொல்லுங்க, நீங்க டைம் சொல்லுங்க, நான் வரேன். நான்
if you come to the பூஜை வந்துருங்களே, பசங்களும் வந்துட்டு இருக்கா பூஜைக்கு.
எத்தனை மணி? கார்த்தாலேயா?
ஆமா, முடியுமா?
வரேன் குருஜி. நான்
ஒரு 7:30 வந்து
பிஃபோர் 9 வரட்டுமா?
வந்துருங்க. பிஃபோர் வந்துடும். அப்போ அதுக்கப்புறம் எனக்கு கொஞ்சம் ஹாஸ்பிட்டல் போகணும்.
ஓகே, வந்துடுறேன் குருஜி.
ரைட் மக்கள்.
ஓகே, நமஸ்காரம்.
ஓகே.
உடம்பு சரியில்லையா குருஜி உங்களுக்கு?
இல்ல some tests and all that to be done.
ஓகே குருஜி.
We were in verse 12. Angushtamatra Purushah.
अंगुष्टमात्र पुरुषः
मध्य आत्मनि तिष्ठति.
मध्य आत्मनि तिष्ठति.
ईशानो भूतभव्यस्य.
ईशानो भूतभव्यस्य.
न ततो विजुगुप्सते.
न ततो विजुगुप्सते.
एतद्वैतत्. Yeah, still in that etadvaitat prakarana, where Yamadharmaraja as the Guru is answering Nachiketa's question about what happens post the fall of the body. Some people say there is, some people say there is nothing after the fall of the body. That which you ask, you were asking, that which you want to understand, that is this that I'm describing in these verses. So that is what it is. Etad vai tat. So in this mantra, he is talking about this Angushtamatra Purusha, the Jivatma, which is identified, its seat is identified as the space in the heart, is non-separate from Paramatma, Ishvaraha, Bhutabhavyasya Ishvaraha. That the same thing which you have to understand, that understanding is what you're seeking. And that is what continues after the body falls in the form of Jivatma, and is the same thing as Paramatma. Angushtamatra Purushaha, which is in the space within the heart, very symbolic. And as Swami explained, it is in the space when the heart is for Upasana's sake. So you can actually meditate upon that. It is the same as the Ishvara, which is all-pervading Tataha. This Acharya expands in his Bashyam. Angushtamatra,
अंगुष्टमात्रः
Angushtaparimana.
अंगुष्टपरिमाणः
Angushtamatra is Acharya explains as Angushta Parimanaha. Parimanaha comes from the dhatu ma. Ma to measure, to limit. All of this come from the same dhatu ma. Parimanaha here in this context is that which is within that, which is limited by. Angushtamatra, which is the size of Angushta. So Acharya explains this Angushtamatra as Angushta Parimanaha, that which is of the size of the thumb. You can't define Jivatma as the size of a thumb, as the size of anything at all. That's why Swamiji says very clearly, this is meant for Upasana only. You describe a size, you describe a space in which that particular thing is found. It is obviously not in absolute terms. It is only for purpose of Upasana. One imagines this Jivatma in the form of a small Angushtamatra seated inside each individual. So it looks as if each individual has a separate Jivatma. Each individual has a separate Jivatma. Given a certain space and time, space and size. What happens is, it is not the three things we talk about, right? We talk about space, vastu, and time. Desha, kala, vastu. And we say Atma is Desha, kala, vastu, anavachinna. It is not in any way limited by any of these three. And if you say that Jivatma is also the same, yet we are saying Jivatma is Angushtamatra. We are also saying Hridaya Pundarikam Tishtati. So space, size, all that is given in this. That's why you have to understand this not as a absolute description of Jivatma. It is only to say that there is Jivatma within Antaryami, that which is within each individual, because this is non-separate from Paramatma. The Jivatma is not contained by time, even this Jivatma. Because the Jivatma word was Naraha in each individual. Na riyate iti Naraha. That doesn't get destroyed. It's an answer to Nachiketa's question. That which is within does not get destroyed. It still continues when the physical body gets destroyed. This destroyed also we will talk about a little later. This is the way Acharya has talked about it. Swamiji has another way of looking at this, which we will look at a little later. This Angushtamatra. So this Angushtamatra Purushaha, which is described in terms of size and in terms of a location for purposes of for Upasana, is the same as Paramatma. Bhuta Bhavyasya Ishaha. Because even the Jiva is non-contained by time. It continues forever till one recognizes the non-separateness of the Jivatma with the Paramatma, it continues. Here the question is it continue? Does it continue after the fall of the body only? But if you take one more step back and look at it wholly, It continues all the time and comes to an end only when the recognition arises that this is the same thing as Paramatma, which is not conditioned or contained by any of these three, Desha, Kala, Vastu. Then what happens? It is not as if this merges with Paramatma. What is the recognition? The recognition, the understanding of the meaning of the Aikyam is, it is the same. Then why does it look different? Because of the way we look at it. It is not different. It is the same. Angushtamatra, when we define it in terms of size and in terms of a location, is only for purposes of initial upasana. Once the recognition comes, there is no such thing. There is no limitation. So it says Angushtamatra means Angushta Parimana in the context of this description. That which is the size of the thumb. Angushta Parimana. Angushta Parimanam.
Angushta-parimanam.
Hridaya Pundarikam.
Hridaya-pundarikam.
Tatchidravati.
Tachchidravati.
Antakarana Upadihi.
Antakarana-upadihi.
Angushta
Angushta-matraha.
Angushtamatra Vamsha Parva Madhyavati.
Angushta-matra-vamsha-parva-madhyavati.
Ambaravat.
Ambaravat.
So he's simply said this is the size, Angushtamatram. When you sit down to doing upasana, meditation, you can imagine that which is within oneself, of a small size, fitting into the space of the heart. Then it says Angushta Parimanam, this Atma, Jivatma of the size of Angushta, Hridaya Pundarikam. The Hridaya, heart. It is not the physical heart we're talking about. Again, we have to repeat and remind ourselves it is only for purposes of upasana. Shaped like a lotus. This is a description given everywhere. Hita Pundarikam. But I don't know if you can really call heart lotus shaped. Maybe the lotus bud is more or less like that. More or less. It's not really that. But that's how it's described. We also say, for example, there are words which are used. Very often I hear people say, lotus feet of my guru. It's only symbolic in the mind. So, Angushta Parimanam, Hridaya Pundarikam, in this Hridaya, in the heart, I can't, for the life of me, imagine, inside the heart is Jivatma, but this is how it is described. We need to be able to see way beyond this. Hridaya Pundarikam Tad Chitravati. In that space is a space. Chidravati. A small space in which this Angushtamatra Purusha is physically sitting. There is no Angushtamatra Purusha. You can't, the moment you give it a space and time and shape and size, you are limiting yourself. But because every jiva, every sharira has an Atma, which you can call Chidabhasa, which I can recognize because each one is operational, he is sentient, he is doing something or the other. Therefore, I can recognize the presence of that Atma. But it is not multiple different Atmas. That is what the whole mantra is talking about. There is no, it's not as if there is one Atma here, another Atma there, another Atma there. It looks like that. And that is what we are trying to negate and understand. Hridaya Pundarikam Tat Chidravati Antakarana Upadhi. The answer is there in the next word. This is all only Upadhi. If I think of Jivatma without shape, without size, without any properties, without any attributes, I find it difficult to recognize. Therefore, I attach the Upadhi. Here, what is the Upadhi? Antakarana. The Antakarana Upadhi looks like giving it an individual identity. Shape, size, everything it is giving. This is what is called Angushta Matra, is the definition. Angushta Parimana Hridaya Pundarikam Tat Chidravatyanta Karana Upadhi Angushta Matra. And Acharya then gives us another example. There are many examples here which have to be taken very carefully, not literally. All examples are like that. Any drishtanta has to be taken only to understand what is trying to exemplify, not everything. You cannot say, somebody, a very fast runner, you say he's cheetah. Because, cheetah is a fast sprinter. That doesn't mean that he's got 4 legs, he's got spots on it and so on. He only says that he runs fast, that's all. Because identification is with cheetah for its speed. So all these examples have to be seen for what they're trying to exemplify. So he says, Angushta Matra Vamsha Parva Madhyavati Ambaravat. If you take a bamboo of the size Angushta Matra, you see in the bamboo there are these knots. And between those knots, the bamboo is hollow. In fact, that is how we make the flute. Because the knots put an end to the hollow, and then on the other side also there's a knot. So the maker of the flute has to choose one which has the correct length between 2 knots and take only that one piece and make appropriate holes to produce different sounds. That space in the hollow space in the bamboo, like that space, Angushtamatra Vamsha. Vamsha is bamboo. Vamsha also has other meanings, but Vamsha is also bamboo. That bamboo of that size between 2 knots, which is of the size of an Angushta, in that is Parva. Parva of what? Parva means to fill. Ambaravat, the space fills it. Madhyavati, within that, there is a space between the 2 knots, like that space, Ambaravat. Like that space, in this space contained in the heart, all these are purely physical descriptions. That Purusha exists. I will always add as though exists. Remember, when we talk about the individual Jivatma, we have looked at another example. There is only one Paramatma. Then how do I see so many Jivatmas? Because each Jivatma has an Upadhi, an Antakarana. These Upadhis are like reflecting surfaces. Again, example only. All these reflecting surfaces have different characteristics. It could be a mirror which is concave, a mirror which is convex, mirror which is clean, mirror which is dirty. It may be a surface of water. It could be a piece of metal. It could be anything. And because these are so many different varieties of reflecting surfaces, in this case we call them upadhi, antakarana upadhi, they will reflect the single one sun in this solar system of ours and reflect that sun, and that reflected sun also provides light. Just like the sun provides light, reflected sun also provides light. I don't know how many of you have played with mirrors in your childhood. Many of us have done that, right? You go take a mirror outside and keep flashing it on somebody. That is what is happening. You use that mirror to shine light on somebody. Because the mirror also, the reflected sun in the mirror also provides light. So each individual jiva with its upadhi, which is the equivalent of a reflecting surface, is able to reflect the presence of the Atma. This jivatma looks like many different jivatmas, each with its own special features and characteristics. A broken mirror might show the sun to be with a break in between. A concave mirror might show the sun to be different from a convex mirror sun. A dirty mirror might show the sun to be dirty. You can't go and clean the sun because the sun is dirty. It is a reflecting surface which is dirty. You know, it's like you go and look at yourself in the mirror and you see some spots in the eye, in the face, and you take a piece of cotton and say, come on, come on, come on, I don't want the spot. Out, damn spot. And then you discover the spot, here spot is in the mirror. So all these differences come because of a reflecting surface of the upadhi. Angushtamatra Vamsha Parva Madhyavati Ambaravat. So you have this space within each upadhi, each hridaya, making it look as though there are many different jivatmas. But this Purusha, which we've been trying to understand within each Sharira, also should be seen that this is not different from the Purusha which is Sarvamidam Tatam. So Acharya breaks it up. He says, Purusha
Purushah
Purnam Anena Sarvamiti.
Purnam Anena Sarvam Iti.
That Purusha which you have identified as individual Purusha, Jivatma, relook at it. This Purusha is by which Sarvam iti Purnam. That fills up everything, that pervades everything. That Purusha is the same as this Purusha. Purushaha Sarv. That's like him. That is what we're trying to understand. That I am not one separate entity because I have a Jivatma which enlivens me, and therefore this body enlivens this body, this mind, this all the senses and thoughts and everything else, etc. And is different from somebody else. And is different from somebody which does not have a upadhi at all. That is the way we look at it to begin with. But it says, when you try to understand that this is only the same Purusha redefined as Purayati. This remains Madhye Atmani, Madhye Atmani,
मध्ये आत्मनि
Sharire.
शरीरे.
Again, we have to be careful because here in the Moolam, in the mantra, it says Angushtamatra Purusha Madhya Atmani Tishtati. What does the Atmani mean? But our Sharira. We are not talking about any other Atma here. So Acharya clarifies. Madhye Atmani, Atmani means Sharire Tishtati Yaha.
तिष्ठति यः
Yaha Tam Atmanam
यः तम्
यः तम्
आत्मानम्
आत्मानं
Ishanam Bhutabhavyasya
ईशानं
ईशानं
भूतभव्यस्य
भूतभव्यस्य
Viditva
विदित्वा
विदित्वा
न ततः इत्यादि पूर्ववत्.
न
न
ततः
ततः
इत्यादि
इत्यादि
पूर्ववत्
पूर्ववत्.
Therefore, this when a person recognizes that Jivatma Madhye Atmani Sharire Tishtati, that which is exists within this Sharira, we will always be looking at it as that individual Jivatma like that Tam Atmanam, that Jivatma, you recognize it as Ishanam Bhutabhavyasya. Ishanam Bhutabhavyasya Viditva. Knowing that to be non-separate from Paramatma. The Paramatma who is not contained by time, who has total control over time, who is the creator of time. This Jivatma is the same as that. Once one recognizes that, Tam Atmanam Ishanam Bhutabhavyasya Viditva, what happens when you recognize that? He says, Na tataha ityadi purvavat. Bhashyakara does not want to repeat himself because he's already said earlier what happens. Na tato vijugupsate. He has no cause to look for external protection. Protection you need for what? Only for the upadhi. The Sharira upadhi, Sthula Sharira upadhi, Sukshma Sharira upadhi, Antakarana upadhi. That you may want to protect. Atma requires no protection. When I recognize this Jivatma as not as one which is different from other things that I see around me, it is the same as that Paramatma which is the master of Desha Kala Vastu, the Karanam for Desha Kala Vastu. Therefore, Aham is Desha Kala Vastu Karanam, Jagat Karanam. Then where is the question of needing external protection? He does not need any external protection. In different ways this is given. The next verse also talks about something very similar. But has a value because we need to understand that the repetition has a value in trying to understand the real meaning of what is being said. Another Mahavakya. Therefore, he finishes this verse with saying, Etad Vaitat. So many places, wherever you see Etad Vaitat, it is clearly an explanation of what Nachiketa asked for. It is indeed that. That is the description, that is the definition, that is the Swarupa of the Atma. And he's trying to say, this is what you asked for. Etad Vaitat. The next mantra also says Etad Vaitat. That means Lakshmi mantra also brings in the same idea of aikyam between the Jivatma that we see, the multiple different things we see, and Paramatma, which is one, and the two are the same. They are not two different things which mix with one another or merge with one another. It is the same. We have to understand the distinction. It is not like the Jivatma, once he understands, goes and merges with Paramatma. No, that is not the understanding. The understanding is Jivatma is Paramatma. There is no going and mixing with anything else. But for the early stages learning, in the beginning, when you start understanding this, we accept that. Just as we accept Dvaitam, because we see that as a need to overcome preconceived ideas that don't go away easily. We accept that. Meaning Advaita Vedanta accepts that and says, yes, please carry on. That is why Bhagavan in Bhagavad Gita also says, when somebody is doing karma, saying focusing on karma, I should do what is prescribed in the Vedas. Bhagavan says, don't disturb them. Allow them to do it. I have seen people come to Swamiji, great upasakas, bhaktas, who will follow, either they follow Vedanta prescribed karma, or they simply go into pure bhakti mode and sing praises of Ishvara in whatever form they have seen Ishvara. Go to temples all the time, every festival, go to different temples, or even if there's no festival, go to different temples. I must go to the Dwadasha Jyotirlinga, I must go to so many different things. He says, good, allow them to do that. But if you look at the depth of what is being tried, what is being said here, what is the vivaksha of Vedanta, then clearly this is more than that. That does not mean that you stop praying. That does not mean you stop doing puja. You continue to do that. Even after jnanam, a person may continue to do puja. In fact, will continue to do puja. There is no need for him to do anything at all, because the him is not there anymore from his perspective or her perspective. But the physical body still remains. Therefore, Jagat perception still remains. And as long as that is there, Bhagavan also says, continue to do all the puja that you were doing earlier, all the karma that you were doing earlier. You don't stop doing that. But you do it with certain understanding, with certain clarity. That this individual, separate looking Jivatma with its own properties, with its own attributes, is non-separate from Paramatma, then your doing puja is also as a different attitude. You may do puja to ask Ishvara to bless other people, remove the suffering in the world, or reduce it as much as possible. So you add one more karma to the Jagat, and also for only one is Loka Sangrahartham, it says. And also as an example for others. People look up to a person who has already gained that knowledge. There is something special about those people. Even though the body continues, you can see that there's a difference. They become the thought leaders for the rest of the society. So again, the same idea is presented in the next mantra. Kincha.
Kincha.
Kincha means further. This is Bhashyakara's introduction to the next mantra. Kincha.
Kincha.
Angushtamatra Purushaha.
Angushtamatra Purushaha.
Jyotiriva Dhumakaha.
Jyotiriva Dhumakaha.
Ishano Bhutabhavyasya.
Ishano Bhutabhavyasya.
Sa evadya sa ushvaha.
Sa evadya sa ushvaha.
Etadvaitat.
Etadvaitat.
Clearly the same. You can see many of the words are the same as you saw in the previous mantra. Angushtamatra Purushaha. Jyotihi iva adhumakaha. That Angushtamatra Purushaha, the Jivatma which has been described as having a size and having a place of residence in each Sharira, that is non-separate from Ishvara if you remove the Upadhi. You don't physically remove the Upadhi, you can't physically remove the Upadhi. But if you can see that the Upadhi is what seems to give it individuality. Upadhis are different. So he gives an example. Jyotihi iva adhumakaha. If you have Jyoti, if you have a flame, and you think of the smoke, dhuma, as the Upadhi, then the flame without smoke, Jyotihi iva adhumakaha, that flame is the same. They look different. There is one flame here because you burned something, another flame here you burned something. Both of them don't have any smoke. Smoke comes because there is a moisture in the fuel. No smoke. Flame is the same. Limited example. Like that flame without smoke, this Angushtamatra Purushaha is Purushaha. The first Purusha is the Jivatma. It is the same as that Purusha which is Sarvam Puriyati. Remember the two meanings of the word Purusha. Pure Ushati, Pure Vasati. This Sharira is a Pura. In that Pura, Navadvare Pure Dehi, that Dehi lives, exists. When you look at it as Jivatma, it is the same Purusha which pervades everything. Sarvamidam tatam. When you understand that they are the same, there is no difference at all, then you can understand that there is only Ekameva Advitiyam. Angushtamatra Purushaha Jyotiheva Adhumakaha. That Ishaha, previous mantra said Ishano Bhutabhavyasya, which is the controller of time, which is the Karanam for time, which is Paramatma. This Jivatma is the same as that. This Purusha is the same as that Purusha. Earlier, the previous mantra he said, having seen the oneness, the one who sees that oneness does not require any external protection. Na tatu vijugupsate. Gopayitum ichha nasti. No desire to be protected. Here is a Ishano Bhuta Vivesya Sa Eva Adhya Sa Ushvaha. Adhya is today. Shvaha is tomorrow. That indeed Eva Adhya Sa Ushvaha, which is not subject to time. That is that Atma that you are looking for, that you are asking whether it exists. Saiti eke, another. Asti eke, nasti chaike. That you asked for is this. Asti. It is nityam. Always asti. When this Angushta Matra, like I said, Swamiji has a slightly different take on this. When you look at it as an example and say that, look, you have to do it for Upasana, one might get a little hurt of saying this is not a very good example. We are talking about Advaita Vedanta. Understanding. We are all people who have been studying for a number of years. And therefore, suddenly you tell me that you have to do this for Upasana's sake. Maybe many of us still need that Upasana. Swamiji has a slightly different way of looking at it. He says, look at this hand. There are these four fingers, Ahankara in the Tarjaniya, body mind sense complex, everything else in the Jagat. They are together. Then this thumb is separate. The thumb is asangaha. It has nothing to do with them. And yet, without the thumb, this hand is useless. In a sense, the thumb sustains all the activities of the hand. That is why, you remember the story of Ekalavya. The Guru knew, cut off his thumb, then there will not be any competition to Arjuna. Hand becomes useless. Everything that the hand does depends on the thumb. So if you imagine it like that, as another way of looking at the Drishtanta, thumb is like the Paramatma, asangaha, not attached to any of these, separate, and yet nothing can operate without this. That is the nature of Atma. Atma enlivens Ahankara, body, mind, sense complex, Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, everything. Otherwise they are Jada. That is why I told you, the Chin Mudra now becomes easy to understand. Paramatma, Ahankara, or Atma and Ahankara separate from these samsara. When they come together, there's no beginning, there's no end, there's no birth, there's no death. Simple thing to understand. So I think Swamiji has a very beautiful way of looking at it. Slightly different from a very few places where Swamiji deviates or adds to what Bhashyakara has. Otherwise, we follow for Bhashyakara almost to the letter. But you can look at it like this. You can look at both ways and both will work. Angushtam matra purushaha adhumakaha. Without smoke, jyotihi iva bhuta bhavyasya ishanaha sa eva adya vartate, you can add. Sa eva adya vartate U sa eva shvaha vetishyati. Will be there tomorrow. That which is not subject to time, that which is the master of time, the creator of time, that etad vaitat is what you were looking for. Hey, Nachiketa. There may not be much in terms of Bashyam here because we already looked at most of the Bashyam earlier, but we will read the Bashyam. Angushtamatra Purushaha
Angushtamatra Purushaha
Jyotihi va Adhumakaha
Jyotihi iva adhumakaha
Adhumakamiti Yuktam
Adhumakam iti yuktam
Jyotihi Paratvat.
Jyotihi paratvat.
Many times Bhashyakara will point out where it is grammatically different, where it is Chandasam. Here is one of those examples. Angushtamatra Purushaha, that Purusha of the size of the Angushta, Jyotihi iva Adhumakaha, like the fire without smoke. Now, what is Bhashyakara pointing out? Adhumakaha. Jyotihi looks like Pullinga. Because you have those Visarga. Generally, we will see Pullinga because Visarga is there. But Jyotihi is not Pullinga. What is the basic Shabda from which Jyotihi comes? It is Jyotis. So you will get things like Jyotihi, Jyotishi, Jyotishi. So Jyotihi is Prathama Ekavachanam of the Jyotis Shabda. Now, how if that is Napunsakalinga, Jyotis is Napunsakalinga, then how can you say Adhumakaha? Adhumakaha means smokeless fire. Then Adhumakaha should qualify Jyoti, no? And Jyoti is neutral, Napunsakalinga. So what should have been? It should have been Adhumakam, Napunsakalinga. Therefore, you should get Jyoti hiva Adhumakam. So Acharya points out, Jyoti hiva Adhumakaha, Adhumakam iti yuktam. Adhumakam is appropriate because Jyotis is Napunsakalinga. But all these are allowed in Chandasam. We do not point out any errors in Chandasam, in the Shastra. We accept it for what it says. One of the reasons is, in many places you will find Shastra does not distinguish Linga. Because Atma has no Linga. In grammar you say Atman. But when you look at Paramatma, there is no Linga. Sometimes it will show as Pullinga, sometimes it will show as Napunsalinga, sometimes it will show as Srilinga. Unlike some other religions where it's all shown as Pullinga, Father in heaven. Shastra does not recognize Linga. Maybe it's in the same continuation of that. The Shastra says, Jyoti heva adhumakaha. Shankaracharya says, if you read it as adhumakam, is yuktam. Jyotihi being Napunsakalinga of the Shabdam, Jyotis Shabdam. Yastu evam lakshitah.
यस्तु एवं लक्षितः
You can put it back on. योगिभिः हृदये
योगिभिः हृदय
ईशानभूतभव्यस्य
ईशानभूतभव्यस्य
स एव नित्यः
स नित्यः
कूटस्थः
कूटस्थः
अद्य
अद्य
इदानीं प्राणिषु वर्तमानः
इदानीं प्राणिषु वर्तमानः
स उ श्वः अपि वर्तिष्यते.
स ऊष्वः अपि वर्तिष्यते
यः तु एवं लक्षितः, that which is indicated by this Angushtamatra Purushah, by the yogis, by the knowledgeable people, yogi bihi, that which is pointed out hidaye, in the hridayam, the jivatma, yogis point out, knowledgeable people point out that what is indicated by this is the same as Ishana Bhuta Bhavyasya Saha Eva. Made it very clear. That which is Angushtamatra Purushaha Hridaye Tishtati is the same as Ishana Bhuta Bhavyasya Saha Eva. Is non-separate from, non-different from Ishaha. What kind of Ishaha? Nityaha, Kutasthaha. Not subject to time, not subject to any form of change. Adya, today. Adya he translates as Idanim, now. Pranishu Vartamanaha, that which exists in every prani. That is our Jivatma. Sa ushvaha api vartishyate, will continue to exist also in the future. Shvaha is tomorrow, indicating all the future. Therefore, that which is not subject to time, that Isha is the same as Angushtamatra Purushaha, which is in the Hridaya of every living being. Idanim Sarva Pranishu Vartamanaha, that which is in every Jiva. Na anyah
न अन्यः
tat samaha
तत्समः
anyascha
अन्यश्च
janishyate ityarthah.
जनिष्यत इत्यर्थः
There is no equivalent because there is no second. That equivalent samaha, there is no other. Ekameva advitiyam. Anyascha janishyate na janishyate. Nothing ever is created. No equivalence to Atma. We've been talking about this Beda. There is no Beda either in terms of Swagata Bheda or Swajatiya Bheda or Vijatiya Bheda, because there is no second. There is no equivalent. Na anya tat samaha anyascha janishyate ityartha. Nothing is ever created, nothing is ever born. Anena
अनेन
Nayamasti iti chaike.
नायमस्ति इति चैक
इत्ययम पक्षः
इत्ययं पक्षः
न्यायतः अप्राप्तः
न्यायतः अप्राप्तः
न्यायतः अप्राप्तः अपि
न्यायतः अप्राप्तः अपि
स्ववचनेन
स्ववचनेन
श्रुत्या प्रत्युक्तः
श्रुत्या प्रत्युक्तः
तथा क्षणभङ्गवादश्च
तथा क्षणभङ्गवादश्च
by this anena Bhashyakara says it addresses the two things that Nachiketa said, asti tyeke nayam asti iti chaike. Some people say there is something that exists post this sharira, and others say there is nothing exists post the sharira. So there are two pakshas. One arguing that there is nothing after the death of the body, and there is something which continues after the death of the body. So this addresses those people who say there is nothing after the sharira goes. Typically, there are three types of people who raise this issue. A lot of people who will say, like Charvakas, that there is no thing like Janma, Punarjanma. What you have now in this Janma is what you have. Enjoy it, and after you die, there's nothing after that. That is Charvaka's argument. Then there are Shunyavadis. There never is anything. And there are Kshanikavadis, who say this so-called Atma is keep blinking. It is there, it's not there, it's there, it's not there. Now we see it, now we don't see it, now we see it, now we don't see it. None of these arguments can stand vichara. So this mantra addresses those people and makes it clear to Nachiketa that something, Atma, does exist. It is never born, it never dies. It's the only thing that exists. If we talk existence, Atma is the only thing, there is nothing else. How does it counter this? We will look at in the next class, because it will take a little time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om